there, Pedro Captain Fishing. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we went to the Saltwater Fishing Expo this past weekend. Thank you to everybody that stopped by, the new followers, the subscribers. I want to thank everybody that was there, saying hi and supporting us. But during that expo, as you can see, there's a picture of me, Nick Honachefsky, and me talking. And I had the pleasure and honor to actually do a be a guest speaker with Nick Honachefsky during the Saltwater Edison show. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys on my experience on talking on my first ever seminar. So sit back, relax, make sure don't forget to subscribe, like, comment down below what you think of the video, and share to your family and friends. Without further ado, let's get into the video.
Here yet? Anyone? I can't actually raise my hand on that. I've only been fishing once because doing all these shows, but after Sunday, I'll be fishing steadily. Does anyone watch, first of all, to introduce myself, my name is Nick Honachefsky. I do a television show called Saltwater Underground. Now, does anyone watch Saltwater Underground here? All right, that's what I like to hear. If you don't watch it yet, please do. It's all based in New Jersey fishing. We're on Discovery Channel, Sportsman's Channel, Waypoint TV, World Fishing Network. You can access it everywhere. That's a fact. Yeah, good point. But that brings me to the river system. So in recent years, since we've had those warm winters, these fish are aggressive, and what they're doing nowadays is hitting artificial lures. It's not just bait anymore. And at this time, actually, I want to bring up a little local Sharpie here who fishes the river systems. He's going to give us about a 5-minute lecture on how to actually fish the proper artificial. So why don't you guys give it up for Pedro over here?
Alright everybody, hi, my name is Pedro. I'm actually part of the Mini Bay. I'm at booth 710. And I usually fish in early March, and that's when I start using bloodworms and worming rigs. But I usually like to fish in late March to early April, and that's when I start using artificial lures. Now, I do bait fish, but my favorite type of fishing is artificial lures. Just getting that reaction bite, just really nice and slow. You're unexpecting a bite, and then all of a sudden you get hit. So that's what I'm going to be talking about, on how to fish the correct baits and what baits I like to fish and colors.
What's your first lure that you're choosing when you're going to the river tonight?
So for river fishing in around April, early April to late March, you want to have soft plastic lures. My favorite soft plastic lures are the Tsunami holographic swim shads. And they're typically a nice small presentation, but they represent a bunker, a herring, or a small bait fish that's going to be in the river that those stripers are going to be targeting. Now, I like, my favorite colors are black spot pearl, purple haze, black bag purple, and lime truce. Those different colors, you want to have those different colors in your bag. Like Nick said, always keep a lot. And always write down your favorite bait and which bait that was hitting that night. And if it keeps going, use that same pattern. But let's say in 2 weeks, they'll hit this color shad instead of this color shad. So you always have to keep changing it up every week.
With a shad, how are you working that lure?
So the way I'm working my shads is that I have my Tsunami Airwave Elite Light. It's an 8-foot rod. So the way I'm working the shad is basically I'm flipping it out, casting it out pretty far. I'm just giving it a super slow retrieve. And then once in a while, I'll lift the rod up and I'll let it drop. When that bait is dropping down, the stripers will hit automatically because that shad, when it's going down, it's just wobbling side to side. And then just keep doing that same pattern. And also fan cast. So if you cast to the left, cast to the right. Just figure out which spot you're going to throw this bait and keep using that same pattern, that same technique. You could also switch it up, do it a little faster, do it a little slower, just that same technique, and that's the technique that works for me more often.
And adding what Pedro said, slow in the springtime is the best method to be able to present your bait, because these fish are moving slow. A lot of times with the shads or the gliders, you feel them poking. They'll be poking it and not hitting it because it's moving a little bit too fast. If you feel that, just try and slow it down even more. Slow your retrieve down even more and more as you're reeling in. What's the next lure you got?
So the next lures I have is a wooden swimmer. And I'm going to be fishing this in the whole month of April into early May. And here is a Tsunami metal lip. This is a wooden swimmer, and this is a 5-inch size. Now, this bait represents, in April, they're going to be feeding on peanut bunkers. I call them dollar bill bunkers. A 5-inch bunker or more, or even small adult bunkers. That's what this swimmer is going to represent. And the way I'm going to be fishing it, I'm going to be fishing it in the rivers or in the Raritan Bay, or in the bays. And the swimmer is supposed to look like a dead bait fish. So when you're swimming it, it's going to go side to side, side to side. And the same retrieve as the shot, I'm going to slowly reel it. And all the swimmer is doing is just going side to side like a dead bait fish. But sometimes I'll stop it and give it a twitch. And the swimmer just goes like this and then twitches. Pause and just keep going on, and that it's like a dead bait fish, like trying to swim, and then it stops and twitches like a sign of life. It's like I'm still got it in me. It's kicking.
And those metal lips are great all the way through May when you're using them in the surf line too, and those big bunker schools around, which we're going to cover in a little bit. But pay attention to what Pedro said about reeling in super slow, and then let that metal lip swimmer really wobble and represent itself like an injured bait fish, because the bigger fish are going to hammer those injured bait fish profiles. Talk about that last glide bait you got there.
So this is still in the relation of a swimmer, but this is actually a new bait that Tsunami came out with this past season. This is the Tsunami glide bait, Tsunami twitch bait, 5 inches, 5.5 inches. Now this is supposed to represent a lot of, just like the swimmer, it's supposed to represent a big bunker, a dollar bill bunker, like I said before, or some peanut bunker. So it's a really nice streamlined design, and just like the swimmer, you're going to work it. With this glide bait, you don't have to go super fast or super slow. The slower the retrieve, the bigger the weight.
Are you whipping that thing, or are you just like doing like a walk the dog style? Because glide baits have been the really hot, bait like the scabillies or the Tsunamis here in that white. But if people want to know that technique of how to work this.
So the technique that you want to do is you want to cast out with your rod, and this is a slow sinking bait. So this is supposed to suspend around and slow sink in, depends where you're going to be fishing. Let's say if you're fishing in 20 feet of water. That bait is going to slowly sink down. It's going to go side to side when it's sinking. And you want to let it sink for about 10 seconds. And then you want to do a super slow retrieve. Super slow retrieve, and that bait's going to go side to side. And like the swimmer, it's going to be under the water, so the bass are going to see that, and it's going side to side like a dead bunker. Then you're going to wait, and then twitch it. And just like that, that glide bait is going to go all the way to the side. And sometimes you want to do that super slow retrieve and switch it up. Do 2 twitches or 3 twitches.
Right.
Let it drop for about 5 or 4 seconds, and then do that same retrieve over and over again. Because those bass, the bait fish is like computers. It's like, where am I going? So that's what the glide bait is supposed to do. It's supposed to represent a dead bait fish as well.
Now, Pedro, I'm running out of time here, so I just want to say thank you so much. I guys want to give it up. At the Tsunami bit, because if you got any questions for him, he'll definitely let you know everything you need to know about fishing, right? Thank you, Pedro. I really appreciate it, bud. Funny story about Pedro, how we met. 4 years ago, I'm sitting here at this show, and how old are you now, sir?
I'm 12.
So when he was 8 years old, right, he comes to the Saltwater Expo, and he's like, I got a YouTube channel. He's like, can I film you? And he's got like the GoPro on me and stuff. I'm like, oh, sure, I love helping kids out. Blah, blah. So I sit down, and I'm expecting questions like, oh, do you like fishing? Where do you like fishing and stuff? So I sit down and prepare for this, and I hear like, so Nick, regarding motion of a lure or the distance that you cast or the rod type, like what is actually the bass thinking? Is it more about vibration? Is it more about, I'm sitting here looking at this kid, I was like, I've never been interviewed so in depth as I have by Pedro. So he's a good up and comer. He's going to be a real shining star in this industry. Anyway, but piggybacking off what Pedro was saying there, this is an important point where I catch a ton of my not only big fish, but a lot of fish. 3 days before and 3 days after a full or a new moon. So all that new moon is bringing in that heavy water, but those 2 or 3 days before the full or new, it's not that crazy tidal current yet. So it's almost like those fish can feed effectively without having to battle a severe tidal current on the day of the full or new moon. So 2 days before and 3 days before and 3 days after. And you're looking in April for the roily churny surf, and the bass water temp is 58 to 65 degrees. Surf gear checklist and bait fishing is your usual stuff. You know, I generally 30 to 50 pound leader, 5 to 10 ounce octopus circle hooks. The usual stuff like headlamp, scissors, pliers, sand spike, 3 to 6 ounce pyramid sinkers. Early April stripers, I know I just mentioned that the high tide is a good time to fish, but I've caught so many fish on that low tide, and it's the same theory of the river fish. When the outgoing water is going out and it's warming up, that dead low tide in the surf is warmed up from the sun in the sloughs and the cuts. So when that water starts coming in, all those bass are like, wow, that's warm water. I'm coming into those low tide cuts and sloughs. And you can really effectively target fish throwing clams out. Like I said, you want to plan around the nor'easters, a high-low rig or a fish finder slide rig, which I showed. And you also want to use a pyramid sinker. Now, when we do fish those nor'easters, how many times have you guys bait fished in this rough surf? You cast the line out there in 5 minutes, it's there on the shoreline, right? And you're like, ah, this stinks, I'm going home. You don't have to go home. What you got to do is adapt. Cast out straight ahead, and the current's going this way. I call it walking it down, right? So I'm walking clams, and people are like, wait, you're actively fishing clams? I'm like, yeah. You cast out, and you walk down, right? So you're staying with that current. You're moving this fast, you know, and you're kind of staying in front of that clam. That clam is staying in the surf zone the whole way, and almost immediately you'll get hits right in that slough. If you walk like 100 yards and you're out of the hole, just reel it up and go do that drift. It's called drifting, you know, and then you do that drift again. So don't just always pack it in when your line's laying on the beach.
Will it spool as you're walking down?
What's that?
Will it spool?
No, I try and keep it tight, because you're generally, if a wave pushes in, you obviously reel up the slack, you know what I mean? But generally speaking, it does stay tight the whole way. So that brings us into May, and big time fish start moving around in May, and that's usually, instead of clamming, we go to bunker chunks. Obviously now you can't use bunker snags and live line it back. This fish was before that law came into effect, and we'd snag bunker from the surf and drop it. But you can snag a bunker, reel it back in, and re-outfit it to a 9 to 10 octopus circle hook, cast it back out with a fish finder slide or a pyramid sinker, 3-way swivel rig, which is, I use this for all my chunking rigs. It's, you know, either a fish finder slide or 3-way swivel with your pyramid sinker. Bigger fish, 40 to 50 pound fluorocarbon leader, and then your octopus circle hook on there. The one point I want to note with any kind of fishing in the surf, if you're using a fish finder slide, they work the best when there's no current and the water's not too churny, because if anyone has ever fished a fish finder slide in rough surf, you reel in a ball of braided line and everything, and it's untenable, right? So if the surf is really rough, I'll go straight to that 3-way swivel rig, because it roots down, and it's just that leader running around and wrapping around. So you won't get that massive, nasty, you know, braided bait ball that you spend so long trying to untangle.
If you're live lining that bunker, how do you hook it?
When I'm from the beach, I'll hook them through the back and cast out. Because usually if you're drifting from a boat, you want them going naturally, and that's when you hook them through the nose or the bottom lip. But from the beach, I usually just like hooking them through the back and casting them out. And you obviously need a really big rod to kind of like launch a bunker out.
Right.
And hey, you know, you're good. But speaking of bunker, in May is, I mean, you know, May is when like the peak of the bunker run is around in the springtime. So you want to look for bunker schools. And the point of this picture here is that I was out on a sandbar, right, waded out, and I'm, you know, you think you're on the sandbar, I'm going to cast out in front of me, right? You always think, oh, I just got to cast out straight. This was to the left of me. You know what I did? I took a bunker snag, and I'm like, oh, there's the fish right to the left of me. Snagged the bunker, let it drop in there. And I'm pulling bass out of this right here to my left while the beach is 50 yards behind me, you know? So always look where the bunker is and work around that school. And one of the best ways to actively fish these bunker schools instead of like snagging or chunking is popping bass. Now this fish here, Did anyone get in on that like Sandy Hook Seabright spring run last year, if any chance? Dude, it was nuts. You know, we hadn't seen big fish like that in the spring, aggressively hitting poppers like in quite a long time. I mean, in the fall, yes, but the springtime. So I was using these the Savage Gear poppers or the Yozuri Hydro poppers, and this is when the bunker ran. You can see all the bunker schools out there. Now, when you see bunker, big bunker, I'm talking adult bunker, not dollar bill bunker like Pedro was talking about, but the big ones like, I don't know, $2 bills or whatever you might want to call them. But when I see a bunker school like that, I'm not casting into that school, right? What I'm doing is I'm working the edges of that school, because bass are either underneath that school or they're on the outskirts picking away at the bunker, right? So the biggest mistake is when people see a big ball of bait, they want to cast right into it. You don't want to really do that. I mean, I'm not saying that the fish won't be there, but generally speaking, the bigger fish and the other fish are hanging around the outskirts of the school. So when the bunker's around, they're on aggression strikes, and you want a slow, frantic retrieve with poppers. Now, if you guys, there's two different really types of poppers. You got the concave lip poppers like these Yozuri Hydros, and when they have that big concave lip, they're meant to be like a chugger. So the mistake I see people doing all the time when they're casting these poppers, they're casting out and they're ripping, and they're ripping, and they're ripping. And if you see it from the side, every time they rip, it's 10 yards that popper's going, woo, woo, you know? The point is slow it down.
Also pretty tired.
So yeah, your shoulder runs out. But just slow it down. So with a popper like this, you want to make that big concave lip splash, but just give it one rip, like a 2 to 3 yard rip, and let it sit. 2 to 3 yard rip, let it sit. 2 to 3 yard and slow it down. That bass is behind that thing, looking at it, might tail slap it. He's going to hit when that popper stops. So if you have that thing continually moving, he's not going to hit. He's going to hit when it stops for that second, right? Conversely, well not conversely, the pencil poppers, which don't have the concave lip, but like this panic popper there has on there, it's got like a little bit of a concave lip, but it's a more tapered pencil popper. Now those lures, you work even slower, but you work them frantically. So what I mean by that is you cast out, and those pencil poppers generally lay at a 45-degree angle in the surf. What you do to work them is you work your rod frantically like that, because it's making that popper dance. It's going back and forth. But you're reeling this slow. So my cadence would be like this. Like super slow reel, but I'm working that popper. So what it's doing is it's only moving like a foot or two every crank, but it's going like that, extremely fast, you know, splashing up water, and it's getting those the attention of those bass. So there's the two different ways to work the poppers, the chuggers and the pencil poppers. And by far, in the springtime, you know, when they're on that aggression strike, I really enjoy using poppers, because when you see those big fish hit, oh, another thing is if you do get a hit and you miss it and you go, oh man, and you're like, don't sit there and go, oh man, start working that right again, because those fish will be on that popper all the way until it gets to your feet if they don't hit it. And if you see that fish come in and he swipes away and he doesn't hit, sometimes I just open the bail and do like a 10-foot cast real quick and just boom, 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 and it'll just come and whack that thing. They're aggressive, they want to hit it. But sometimes if they don't hit, slow it down even more. That's the key with the early season poppers. You know, obviously early morning's a good time, but you know, throughout the daytime too in the spring. So that brings us into summer sessions, June to August. What are our goals in, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What pound test do you use for the start cast?
So generally speaking, my canyon bag always has 25, 30 pound when the smaller fish are around. With the bigger fish, 40, 50 pound fluorocarbon. Yep.
How long is the leader that you typically use?
So I don't use any terminal tackle. So what I do is I do an Albright knot with a 4-foot section of fluorocarbon leader to my 30 to 50 pound braided line. You can do a uni to uni knot too.
Double uni?
That's easier, you know, for some people to tie. I just love Albrights. They've never failed me. You know? So, like I said, that brings us into summer sessions. So right now, the migratory push of the fish has moved on. I'm going to kind of glance over summer a little bit to get into the fall, because I think I only have about 25 minutes left. So what the key is, the resident fish are sticking around, and to target these fish is during the pre-dawn and low light hours. So anytime I'm fishing the summertime for bass is either through the nighttime or from about 4 a.m. to like 6 a.m. And in my book here, one of my logs is a chapter called When Orion Fades. So the constellation Orion, anytime I get to that beach, I know where it's at. It's always behind my right-hand shoulder in the summertime, and it's bright in the sky. And that's when I start getting hits, when it's right about here, right? So I'm casting, you know, working like the low light hours, and I know when Orion starts fading into the bay side here, that's when the bite starts, you know, starts slowing down and stopping. Because when that sun starts to rise, the fish are adjusting from that nighttime into the daytime, and that you know, being able to visualize where that lure is completely changes. So when Orion fades, I know it's time to kind of, the bite's going to slow down a little bit. So what you want to do in these summer sessions is get out there super early. I'll use smaller baits. I'll bucktail with small little, you know, like finesse fish. And I'll always use teasers in the summertime because generally speaking, the smaller fish are around. And I catch probably 70% of the fish on the teaser rig, which is tied about 18 to 20 inches above my plug or my bucktail. You know, you can also night shift chunk for the bass around the full and the new moons. But pre-dawn bass is all about, you're losing your visuals, right? Because you're fishing in the nighttime. This goes through any night fishing, even through the fall. What you want to do is listen for splashes. You're going to hear fish popping around. You'll hear them like slurping and tail slapping, right? And inhale, smell if there's bait around. You'll be able to smell bait. Or if it smells that watermelony, fishy smell, that means either like maybe clams are washed up on the beach or sand fleas in the undertow. You know there's bait around. It's a real fishy area. So open up all your senses there. And most importantly, it's all about the contact, the feel of your connection with the plug. So anytime I'm fishing at night, I always want to maintain that contact with the plug and feel that tautness aligned and the plug digging in. If I feel like a wave has washed it and you get that slack line, I immediately reel up until I feel that contact again. Then I slow it down back to its normal speed. But that's the main focus of night fishing, is feel that plugs and make sure it's working its magic when you're doing it. If you lose contact with the plug, you're out of the zone. It's just kind of flailing around. That's one of the most important facets when night fishing, especially in the summertime.
You fish eels?
I don't necessarily fish eels unless I'm in the canal, you know what I mean? But or you know, structures like that, or the jetties and all that. I've never really fished them off the beach. I know guys that have a lot of luck doing it, and that's an old school tactic, you know, obviously. But I don't do it as much anymore. I know they do them around the jetties in North Jersey, even barren beaches too, you know. Just a lot of work fishing eels, you know. Which brings us into the early fall transition. So now we're talking about September and October. And if you guys know it like I know it, every day or every year when Labor Day comes around, that Monday, it drops 20 degrees. It just happens. I don't know how they planned it or how it works like that. I guess the aperture of the earth or whatever. But that Monday, everything starts to cool down, right? So the post-Labor Day cool down means that the water temps are starting to cool down. So when we have like 75, 76, 78 degree water temps, we're waiting for that cool down to bring those bass from northerly climates back into our waters. And generally speaking, that happens when it starts getting around 63 to 70 degrees. 70 degrees is kind of that magic mark, 70, 69, 68, where we start seeing that true push of migratory fish coming back down. We're looking at this time, you know, the hurricane surf during like September. That's always when hurricanes are coming in and roiling up the surf line, crushing up those clams. We're starting to see 15, 20, 25 pound fish moving into our area. The start of the bait migration happens in September and October, where the mullet run is really happening. So that cooling water temps and the air temps are pushing all the mullet and the peanut bunker out of the backwaters to hang right tight to the shoreline there. And like I mentioned, September, October, that used to be the prime time for bass and bluefish. But the mullet run's even getting later every year. Now the mullet run's not coming until like mid-October a lot of times, you know. So when those fish are, if those bait are pushing out at the same time that the water temps are dropping, you can bet that there's going to be bass there. You know, we're talking back on the clams when that roily hurricane surf happens. But mullet run, if you guys know how to use a cast net, you can throw like a cast net out there for mullet. Believe it or not, you know, this is that textbook mullet rig that they use for bluefish, you know. And you can catch bass on these mullet rigs, but you can't really catch them anymore because this isn't a circle hook on here. So what I do with mullet is I'll chunk it up in 3 or 4 little pieces and put it on a circle hook and cast out there in September and October to get those first feeding fish. And then when the hurricane comes around, that water is really roiling up, crushing those clams, raking up those sand fleas in the undertow. So any fish that are around are going to be feeding in the cuts and sloughs. Okay. That brings us to peak time, late fall run, November and December. We're talking about run and gun fishing now. This is when it's all active. This is the prime time of the year. Jersey surf is the mecca now. I don't care what they say about Montauk. Jersey's the place to be for surf striped bass, okay? If you guys have been fishing any time in the last 10 years, you all know it, right? So, perfect water temperatures, 58 to 63 degrees. Morning sun-up activity is the first hot bite. You'll see blitzes throughout the afternoons and then into a sunset bite. You want to be mobile. You want to be spot hopping. You want to time your tides for the high tides when they're coming in, and then dead lows, you're walking down on the sandbar to reach those outer fish that always seem to be a little too far to cast to. Right? You want to match the hatch with the bait migration, so you're getting a whole different selection, not a whole different selection of lures, but a whole different profile match. So what I have is swimming plugs in my bag at the time, whether the Uzuri mag darters or the bomber plugs, which is my tried and true. Daiwa SP minnows work as well. I've got my swimming plugs, I got my shads, I've got poppers, and I've got metals. So that covers all top to bottom of the water column, right? Not only top to bottom water column, but every bait mimic that I can possibly throw out to match the hatch. And the one thing that I still can't grasp my head around is like these guys that wear like these big milk crates, when they're out there surf fishing, right? I know people do it, they want to bring everything, I get it. This is all I use. This is whatever I bring to go to the beach surf fishing, this is all I use. It's got four columns here for all my lures, a little bit for my soft baits, and I just walk around like this, and I have everything I need with all these lures in here to match the hatch and work the water column top to bottom. So it saves you a lot of time, as you get older, your back starts hurting casting all the time and everything, but you have everything you need, so you don't have to overdo it all the time. We're going to talk about real quick reading the beach and how to work blitz conditions properly. Now, if you have access to a beach buggy, many of the towns, especially the Barrier Island from like Brick Beach through Island Beach, you can buy the permits for all the towns. Having a beach buggy is awesome. You can chase the fish. You don't necessarily have to have a buggy to chase the fish. You can drive up the streets and say you see like blitzes with Gannon Simon there. Just go down 4 blocks and park up there, and start casting. You definitely want to do a lot of street hopping. And one point I actually want to make too here is that when you see all the fish blitzing, you want to get ahead of that school, right? Sure, you want to sure you see the fish in front of your feet and people are butting up, and it's cool to run down there and get on those fish. But get ahead of that school, see which way they're moving, so you can anticipate and be the first guy on that blitz, right? When that school's moving north to south, I want to get like 4 blocks ahead of the whole crew of everyone, right? So I'm the first guy there, right? I'm catching fish while everyone's chasing the fish. And I'll catch fish through the blitz, and then once it starts moving through, this is the key. So many people just keep following that blitz, right? What people may or may not know, I see all these people like chasing, and I just keep sitting there, right? The bulk of the bait has moved through, I just keep sitting there, I'm casting. I'll have like 5 to 10 minutes where no hits, maybe 1 hit, something like that. But after 10 minutes, come the hits again. And you know why? Because all the bigger fish are behind that school, sucking down all those dead baits that are falling to the bottom from the blitzes. So while everyone's like fighting each other over the lines there, these big fish are behind that school, eating all those dead baits that have gone to the bottom. And that's when you start reeling in, your plugs and poppers, and you can really trick up these bigger fish and have them all to yourself too, which is awesome. So, the surf gear checklist, I kind of gave you an idea of all that. You guys are very well aware of what the blitzes look like. This was down in Lavalette, and if any of you guys saw my surf episode of Saltwater Underground, it was just amazing. We got drone footage of this, and the bass you can see are on the outskirts of the schools, just hammering all these big fish. But it's truly unbelievable when it gets like that in the spring. Just nuts. Yeah. But that's the whole point, it's blitzing conditions. You got to keep your cool, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever had altercations with people on the beach, but there's a point, There's like, I just wrote a story on beach mugging, it's called, in Saltwater Sportsman, so read it if you want. Kim, I think
I got a kick out of that because nobody stays 30, what is it,
30 to 50 yard rule. Nobody does it, but it's a good guideline, right? 30, 50 yard. I got that whole thing written in the Jersey Surf Diaries too. But, you know, blitzing conditions, you want to keep your cool because it gets so crazy, like people knifing in on each other and like casting over you. So here's some points to keep. You know, do unto others as you'd want to do unto yourself, right? Be respectful. Cast straight in front of you, right? Don't cast to the right or left if someone's around you, but if you have the blitz to yourself, of course, cast where you want. Time the school's movement. That's the most important thing is when you see these blitz chasers and everyone's like, you know, running and gunning, getting in front of a blitz. Those fish aren't just in that blitzing pot of fish. They're on the outskirts. They're in front of the school. They're behind the school. Take your time. You have a lot more peace of mind working the school. Like I said, get ahead of the moving fish. Low tide, wade out, but don't overlook the deep holes like I mentioned with the bunker around inside you. I can't tell you how many times I'm casting behind me from a sandbar because the bass push the fish in behind me, and it's just the craziest thing. Casting towards the beach itself, you know, working plugs, getting bass. Another point is to control your fish when you're in blitzing conditions. So have the right gear. Don't go out there with a, you know, 6-foot rod and 15-pound line. You hook up a 30-pound fish that gets everybody's lines tangled back and forth. You know, you're not going to make friends like that, especially in Jersey, right? So why am I not getting hit? Switch up your tactics. One of the greatest tactics I learned this year is when you see all those blitzing conditions with those fish, you know, I was casting out and I'm not getting hit. I'm like, why am I not getting hit? So what I did is I threw out a storm shad, cast it out, and I used this magic technique. I casted it out, and this was it. Click the bail, and I go. I just let it sit. Didn't even do a thing. 10 seconds later, boom, 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 hit like that. You know why? Because all those fish are hitting those peanut bunker are fluttering down, and this thing was just laying on the seafloor, flopping back and forth with the tide, with the waves, and that looks like a dead bait on the bottom. Those bass were just hammering it, and I was out fishing guys like 5-1 at that point.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I definitely saw a couple situations in the fall where it was like peanut bunker blitzes, and
Yeah.
guys weren't catching anything with like any sort of top water or mid-cone.
Right.
So like in that situation, you just drop it and let it sit there. I imagine you do the same thing with like a bucktail.
Yeah, let it slow and low. You know, make it present as a dead bait. I'm gonna have to go through this a little bit quick here, guys, but match the hatch. Obviously, we got mullet, bunker, rainfish, bay anchovies, spearing, herring, and sand eels. Those are the predominant baits. Matching the hatch here with a storm shad, a peanut bunker. We have herring, which we use our SP minnows or any silver-sided swimming plug. As you can see here, that's an SP minnow up top. You can see it mimics it perfectly. Big baits, can you find the lures in here? You can see how the needlefish and the big wooden lip swimmers work to match. When spearing and bay anchovies are around, we switch up to teaser rigs and small little bucktails to mimic those fish. And a lot of times, like, you see fish everywhere, but they're on bait or small baits like rainfish or bay anchovies. Once you switch up to a small little bait, you'll notice that your hookup ratio goes bananas after that. And then if you have access to a fly rod and you're semi-proficient in fly casting, when these small baits are around, you absolutely will hook up tenfold by you casting around. You can see what a surf candy looks like compared to a bay anchovy. And I'm not a consummate fly caster, but I do end up casting every now and then for fly or for stripers. So I was fishing one day and not catching anything with shads. My buddy comes up with this fly rod. I'm like, dude, give me that fly rod. I gotta make a cast. I don't have a presentation, a proper presentation. So I got the fly rod. This is crazy. And they're like, all these fish are blitzing around, not hitting anything. And I threw that out, reeled it in. This is great.
Yeah, he is. He is the smallest of the day, man. Congratulations.
But it was a nice fish, right?
You think it's gone?
Yeah, exactly. So you're looking at the daytime visuals of all the fish feeding in the fall where the fish are blitzing, but most important thing is to match that hatch and try and mimic that bait profile. Obviously, night shift fishing, without a doubt, the go-to is the black and purple bomber at nighttime. I get more fish from tossing this plug than any other plug, because I'm always fishing during the nighttime for bass when they're around. Work this slow and steady. When the sand eels come in November and December, you want to match the hatch with rubber eels and the avid jigs, such as this with the tails on there. And December and January is when the schoolies come in. The water starts dipping down to 44 degrees. Those fish still stick around, and they're still feeding on sand eels at that point. One important note is when you're using avid jigs, in the morning, the sand eels come out of the sand, and they're poking their heads out like whack-a-moles, and all the stripers are picking them off as they go. When the sun comes finally up, those sand eels are in the water column then. So when you're working an avid jig at the pre-dawn, let it sink to the bottom and drag it along the bottom. You'll find that those bass are whacking it on the bottom because it looks like a sand eel unearthing itself from the sand to move upward. And don't forget, even though it's all schoolie fish, usually in rats in December, there's still cow bass lurking. December 28, 2015, I casted out an 86 jig just to get a rubber eel out there because I knew they were feeding on sand eels. This bass crushed it. It was 48 inches by 26.5-inch girth, which puts it at 51 pounds. And there was monster fish hanging around. So those fish will still hang around. Like I said, stop by my booth. Pick up a copy of Jersey Surf Diaries if you can. I just ran out of time. I don't want to cut into Frank's time here. But I want to thank you all for coming. And always feel free to email me at saltwaterunderground@gmail.com and follow me on Instagram at Nick Honachefsky. If you ever have questions, I will always get back to you. So I want to thank you all for coming.